Namah Shivaya Satatam Panchakritya Vidayine Chidananda Ghanasvatma Paramadhava Bhasine Yasyonmesha Nimeshabhyam Jagata Pralayodayau Tam Shakti Chakra Vibhava Prabhavam Shankaram Stumaha. Good morning, everyone. So we have been studying the Spanda Karikas, and we have talks every Sunday by different speakers. And what is the purpose of that? I was just thinking about that a few minutes ago, that why do we have talks? Because sometimes we get into a routine, a mechanical routine, like, okay, this is the format of satsang, so we must have a talk. But what is the real purpose? Basically, we are sitting here in satsang, and the talks are given at the level of understanding, because we're not doing anything here. We're simply listening, reflecting, and trying to understand what life is all about. And I'm just going to pick up from where Larry left off last Sunday. I think one of the words you mentioned at the fag end of your talk was darshana, right? So darshana is a viewpoint. So actually we are trying to look at life from a particular viewpoint. There's a world view that we all have, that each person has, each culture has, and it's different from one another. The lens through which we look at life through. And in satsang, in talks, which is in Sanskrit called swadhyaya, scriptural study, where you take a scripture as a springboard and you try to understand at the intellectual level what life is all about. If you have problems with your practical life, then satsang is not going to help you, right? If you don't have a job, then meditating doesn't help that. Chanting will not help that. I mean, it might help indirectly, but not directly. For that, you have to apply for jobs. If you have a physical injury or a disease, then you have to go to a doctor. Satsang is not going to help you with that. Again, it might indirectly, but not directly. But if there's a lack of understanding at the intellectual level, then satsang will help you with that. And most of our suffering is at the intellectual level, at the level of understanding. Look at animals who don't have an intellect. They don't have the kind of problems that we have, psychological problems, right? They don't have those issues. They don't need to meditate. I mean, we don't send out flyers to dogs and cats and lions and tigers, right? It would actually be a problem if they start coming into the satsang hall, right? So animals don't have that issue. Humans have that issue because we have an intellect. So there's a problem at the level of the body, for which you need a doctor, or you need to exercise. There are problems at the level of the mind, and intellect is part of the mind. And if the intellect is trained in a certain way, then those problems can dissolve. That is psychological suffering, intellectual suffering, because we ask questions, we wonder, we inquire, we imagine, and those are all functions of the intellect. So the purpose of the talks is to help us understand life through a particular lens. Whoever the speaker is tries to express through his or her contemplation how he or she looks at life, or how the scripture is inviting us to look at life. And if we can just give it a try. There's no subscription fee. You don't have to convert to any particular theology or ideology or philosophy. You can just give it a try. The scripture is saying, look at life through this lens and see if any problems remain in your life. So the title of this talk is a very poetic title, In Love with Life. And I thought I was coming up with something new, but apparently not, because it's been around, I found out later. So that's okay. Every time you think you've come up with something new, it's already been there, which is a good exercise for the ego, because the ego always wants to think that I've come up with something new. And Spanda Karika teaches us that life is cyclical. Life is infinite, and therefore there is nothing new. You are not new, you're not unique, you're not special. We're all in the same boat. So let me use the whiteboard since it's here. So to understand this title will be the exercise for today, and we'll do it together. Okay. In love with life. Now I've deliberately capitalized the two L's because we have our own notions of what love is and what life is. So just to put a question mark on that, which is what we must always do, not just in satsang but in life, is put a question mark on everything, on all our beliefs, on all our ideas, on all our assumptions about life. And if you remember in my previous offering, I spoke about dynamic living, and it was all about that, creativity. Creativity comes from a space of letting go. Because if the mind is already cluttered with information from the past, with ideas from people, from news, right, then it has no room to think of something new, to think out of the box, and therefore the person gets into a repetitive cycle of thinking and acting, predictable, and not in a pleasant way, right? Predictable in a way where it becomes a nuisance for himself and for others. And I think last time, if you remember Larry's talk, it was about taming the elephant. And the reason the senses were the elephant in that metaphor, the reason they are difficult to train by the mahout or the driver who is tiny compared to the elephant is because the elephant has its own intelligence. And so when we get into a repetitive pattern, then it is difficult to get out of that. But there is a way out of that, and that is the promise of the scriptures, and that's what we are going to explore today. And why do we believe the scriptures? Actually, we don't have to. It's not faith in the way we imagine or define faith as. It is not unquestionable faith in the scriptures. It is working faith. As I said, we can just try it out. We work on faith, we live on faith. We go to a doctor, the doctor gives a prescription, we don't ask any questions. We go to the pharmacist gives a medicine, we don't ask any questions. We go to a sports coach, the sports coach or the gym coach gives us some drills and exercises, we don't ask any questions. And if we do, we ask from the point of view of inquiring, not from the point of view of challenging. The scriptures even invite that you challenge the scriptures. But again, having an open mind with a question mark that you might be wrong. You know, when we tell people that, you know, so-and-so psychologist or philosopher could be wrong, they take it personally, like, how could Jung be wrong? Well, he could be wrong. You know, how could Freud be wrong? He could be wrong. There could be a big question mark on his whole theory. So having an open mind, and that trust in the scripture is known as Shraddha. Shraddha in a pramana, a scriptural testimony, because we have no other way of knowing the truth which lies outside of all our frameworks, of all our worldviews. Because if we continue to look at life through our lens, we will never know life as it is. And the scripture says, here's life as it is. Because they're not written by any person. They're aparushaya. They're not written by any human being. Shiva Sutras were revealed. Scripture. It's a revealed text. So it's not like a person just thought of a philosophy or theory one day and just wrote down based on a few case studies. It's not like that. It's the truth, life as it is. And we can just put a question mark on how we think of life as, and look at the scripture and try to look at it through the lens of the scripture. We have no other testimony. Who else are we going to trust? Fox News? CNN? Right? So the only testimony we have to understand and see life is the scripture. And the Guru, who is an embodiment of the scripture. Because the Guru comes from a lineage which starts with Sadashiva, who revealed the scripture. So the scripture, the Guru, and the divine are actually one and the same. And therefore we have to give it a chance. That is all the scripture is asking us to do. I haven't even begun. So life here, I've capitalized L because it includes all the opposites that we discussed about in my first talk on inner strength. And I began with the invocation verse, Mangalacharan, where we invoke the grace of the Guru and Shiva, who are one and the same, and whose nature is what? Yasyonmesha nimeshabhyam jagatah palayo dayo, by whose mere opening and closing of the eyes, the entire world is created and destroyed. So, creation and destruction, life and death, light and darkness. So life here doesn't mean just what we like. Life means life as a whole, which includes death, which includes all the dark elements of life in it. And then you can think of all the other opposites, right? Happiness and sorrow, gain and loss, up and down, left and right, male and female. Anything you could think of has an opposite, because that's the framework of life. That's the framework of life. So, and our likes notwithstanding, that is how life is. And you don't need a scripture to understand that. You can just live life or not even try to live, and you'll still understand that. The life flows in both directions. The two opposites are always together. You cannot just keep your eyes open and never close them. Try it. Okay? You cannot just stay awake all day and never go to sleep. Try it. And so you cannot always keep on living and never die. Try it. Okay, a lot of people are trying it. It's not working. People have been trying for decades or thousands of years. It's still not working. Sun rises and sun sets. Moon rises and moon sets. Moon wanes and waxes, wanes and waxes. Spring comes and goes. Winter comes and goes. Everything comes and goes. And comes back. So that is the framework of life. Now, what is the opposite of loving life? You guys are looking at me as if I think I'm going to use this because we have it. Hating life. And what's the consequence of that? We read about it in the news every day. If we read the news, I've stopped reading them or watching. But if you know about it, or whatever I hear, I feel like whatever is important will come to me, and whatever comes to me is not so pleasant. What's happening out in the world, right? So every other day we hear about some or the other shooting or killing or war, or the newspaper is always stained with blood. And why is that? Because somebody hates life. Isn't that true? Otherwise, why would somebody think of, let alone act on, harming someone or oneself? Because life is sacred. we just sang the invocation mantra. Tam Shakti Chakra Vibhava Prabhavam Shankaram Stumaha. Stumaha, I praise, or I laud, or I bow down to that Shankara who is the source of the wheel of energies. Energies that move this universe, that move this body, that move this mind, and he is at the source. And if the energies are infinite, the source is infinite. But from a lack of understanding that comes eventually, not right away. We're going to go through the whole cycle or the chain. I'm doing it with you right now. Right? So, hatred for life comes from a lack of understanding. And from hatred comes depression, which Spanda Karika talks about, by the way. There's a verse explicitly that says, the cause and the cure for depression, glani, which is disappointment, depression, dejection, despondency. But again, at the intellectual level, if there's a chemical imbalance, you have to go to a psychiatrist, right? But if everything is fine, if you're healthy, and you still have problems, then you come to Spanda Karika. So hatred for life, that comes, it doesn't come overnight. There's a chain. And so the scripture helps us catch ourselves before it gets to this level. And it can get to that level before you know it. Because it's like this a snowball effect. It all starts here. And if we don't control it at the right time, if there's no intervention from the scripture, then the snowball effect becomes unbearable, unbeatable. Anger towards life. I'm angry at life. Why? And we might think I'm angry at a particular person. But it's not that. If somebody is in love, notice that they're happy with everything and everyone. So the anger is towards life, and it's projected at a particular person or oneself, because a lot of people implode and others explode. So it's directed at a particular person, but it's actually anger towards life. And from that comes that blame game that because of you, I'm not you, just me. I'm unhappy, right? Because of a particular person, I'm miserable. It reminds me of a story of a monk who was meditating in solitude in a boat in the middle of a lake. And he thought that this is the perfect place to meditate because there's nobody to disturb me. So he's meditating in the middle of the lake, empty boat, just him, nobody around, nobody inside, nobody outside. And he feels a bump in his boat. And he feels, who could it be who cannot see that I am a peaceful monk meditating? And so he says, well, I'm going to practice steady wisdom and not get agitated by this. The bump is felt again. Well, he feels that the person could be blind, but he surely feels a bump as well, so why is he repeating the action? He feels the bump a third time, and a stronger one this time, and he couldn't control himself, and he just, along with the opening of eyes, and this was not Shiva opening his eyes, this was not Yasya Unmesha Nimesha Abhyam, this was the person, the monk, opening his eyes with anger, about to lash out at who he thought was disturbing him, only to find that the boat that was bumping into his boat was an empty boat. It just got untethered from the dock and was floating in the lake. And the story goes that at that moment, the monk had a realization that the world is an empty boat. That everything just bumps into me, but there's nobody there. And it just brings out what is in here. No, it's like a glass of water, a clear glass of water. If it's transparent, you can see. You can take a spoon and twirl it, and nothing happens. The water remains clear and transparent. But if there's some dust sedimented at the bottom and you agitate that water, the entire water becomes murky. But who is at fault, the spoon or the dust accumulated at the bottom of the glass? It's not the spoon. It's the dust that was there that just came out. So the monk realized that this entire world is not my enemy. I don't need to be angry at life. I don't need to be angry at all. Anger may arise at a particular situation, but being angry is taking ownership of the anger and directing it to a particular person, which is harmful more for yourself than for the other person. It might be helping him or her, purge out some negativity, but to you it is definitely harming. As the Buddha said once, that anger is like holding a hot, burning coal in your hands, where you're about to throw it at the other person, thinking that I'm going to harm him. But you're the one burning, first and foremost. So, anger towards life. And where does anger towards life come from? Wanting to control life. Wanting to control the opening and the closing of Shiva's eyes. Where is Shiva? And where are his eyes? How can you control that? Wanting to control each situation or each person for our pleasure. The second verse, Karika, which I want to introduce finally after to, because the talks are scattered like that, my effort is just to share the spirit of the text and the entire tradition. Not so much go verse by verse or word by word, which I do in other settings and forums, but this, we don't have enough time. The second one says, Yatta sthitam idam sarvam, in which, yatta here means in which, yasmin, in which, sthitam idam sarvam, all this is situated or established. Idam, all this, sarvam, all of it, is sthitam, is established. Karyam yasmacha nirgatam. Karyam means the effect. What is the effect? This life is the effect. And who is the cause? The opening and the closing of Shiva, of that source. So this cause, that cause, produces this effect that we see all around us, our life situations. Yasmat, karyam yasmatcha nirgatam. It arises from that cause. And that's what we face, karyam, the effect. Yasya anavitta rupatvat. If you study logic, they say that each effect has to have a cause, a hetu, a reason. So here the reason is given. Yasya, his, meaning that of the divine. Anavitta rupatvat. His nature can never be concealed. Avitta, concealed. Anavitta, it's a particular compound in Sanskrit, which means it cannot be concealed. Rupatvat, rupa, nature, rupatvat, because his nature is ever present, is ever shining. It can never be concealed. Na nirodhosti kuttachit. At no point, kuttachit, at no point in time, nirodha, cessation or elimination of that principle, na asti, is ever possible. To put it all together, that even in the darkest times, the divine is just as present as he is or it is at the time of light. So, in fact, I went to the commentary of the author himself. Bhattakalata wrote Spanda Karika as a commentary to Shiva Sutras, and Bhattakalata wrote his own commentary to the Karikas, in which he says that when the body undergoes illness and approaches death, even at that time, the Shiva who dwells and shines as the self, as our pure nature, is ever present, doesn't diminish and doesn't get concealed by the changes in the body and the mind. So it basically applies not just to the body but to life in general, that what we call as negative is not negative, it is part of life as a whole. And because we have labels given to different situations, we get into this chain of destruction, self-destruction and other destruction. We want the life to flow in a particular way, and it doesn't, because it is not up to us. Where does this control come from? The sense of I, me, who is at the center point of my life and who feels that I am in control and everything should be in my control. There are two ways to deal with this. When somebody is angry at life, two things have happened, right? One is that something that was in their control, because some things are in our control, and some things are not. Many things are not. For that which is in our control, we must take responsibility. And for that which is not in our control, we must let go. I read a quote recently that, "Oh Lord, give me coffee to change what I can change, and wine to forget what I cannot change." And the wisdom to know the difference between the two. Because oftentimes we try to change what we cannot change, and we don't change what we can change. So instead of anger, what should be our approach to life? Twofold. I shouldn't write this with the red pen now. Take responsibility for that which you can control, for that which is in your domain. So if you fail at a particular task, we're too quick to get angry and play the blame game. Instead of that, let's look at how we can do it differently. That's where creativity comes in. Let's see how we can do it differently. And if it's not in our control, then we must let go. So these, it sounds like a paradox, but they go together. And when they go together, you get creativity. Because the mind is always thinking of a solution. If life is a problem, then the best way to live is with a solution-oriented mindset. That first, yes, it is possible. It is possible. If somebody has done it, then it's possible. If we can step on the moon, then anything is possible. If Elon Musk is thinking of going to the Mars, think of that mind. It's possible. Yes, we can do it. It's just that we haven't gotten it yet. But we can get it. And that's the real purpose of education also. And this is education. What are we doing? We are educating ourselves to the spirit of the scriptures. This is how the scripture looks at life. That everything is possible. If you are not able to do it, either you haven't cracked it, so you need to be more creative, or it is out of your control, so you need to let go. And how do you know the difference between the two? Keep coming to Satsang. Eventually you'll figure out. Shakti Chakra is made up, I mean, you could think of many Shaktis controlling this universe, governing this universe, but there are 5 primary Shaktis of Shiva. Chit Shakti, Ananda Shakti, Ichha Shakti, Gnan Shakti, Kriya Shakti. And let me just write down these. By the way, I also want to share that this is the only tradition that I've come across that offers such a life-affirming approach to living. Because I would say, with a footnote, with a disclaimer, but every other tradition that I have studied or come across or seen the practitioners of have always been life-denying in some way. And sometimes it's very subtle. For example, before I move on to this, since I've already touched upon this now, let's do a brief history of human thought. Can we do that? If not, just indulge me. So let's go to Europe. Okay, ancient Europe. The mother civilization is Greek civilization. And you look at the stories there. I mean, at least the stories that I studied in school, in college, and by myself, they all end in tragedy. What's the problem there? Every king goes on some kind of a conquest or wants to acquire something or the other and finally fails. Or gets it and then realizes, oops, I'm still not happy. And so it's a tragic play, right? Tragic hero, tragic play. And they're trying to do something that is, in a way extraordinary, which hats off to them because they did make that effort. But again, the wisdom wasn't there to let go. That some things are just beyond our control. You look at philosophers in the ancient times, and the primary one being Plato. And what does he talk about? Forms, theory of forms, that these objects are not real. The real thing is the form. What is the form? Like beauty. For example, a painting can be beautiful, but can get ugly. You can destroy it. But beauty cannot be destroyed. So beauty is eternal. Justice is eternal. Goodness is the most eternal. That's the sun of everything. That's the source of everything. So again, in a very subtle, rational way, taking you away from life and projecting some kind of ethereal realm that you have no access to. Abstract, right? And then, of course, the Abrahamic religions, as the way they are practiced by their practitioners, right? Focus on afterlife. Where will you experience pleasure, joy? In heaven. You have to wait for a long time and go to some other place that you have no access to right now. And then there's some intermediary person who is going to negotiate the terms of your entry and exit. And you are basically a sinner. This life is a sin, right? Because you ate, I guess somebody ate an apple. And without clothes. Well, that's the theology that was taught. So, and of course, it's at loggerheads with science because science says eat an apple every day. So, basically, life is not sacred. Life is a sin. We are born sinners because of no fault of ours. And then somebody, God had a son, no daughter, just one son. And that's the only way. And look at history that was created because of that worldview. Because what becomes the focus then? To save people. somebody takes the uh, burden of saving souls, harvesting souls. That's what it was called. Harvesting souls, going out to other countries and converting people and wiping out cultures, indigenous cultures. Why? Because that is useless. This is a real philosophy. This is a real theology. This is the truth. And anytime someone says that, just know that it's a red flag. No person can know the truth. Then, of course, the other traditions that come from that, or that date before that talk about promised land somewhere else. And they're still fighting over that, right? They're still fighting over the promised land, land of milk and honey. That's the only place where we'll experience freedom. And God is angry and jealous, and he just loves his own people, but not everyone else. And then the traditions that come from that, look at the history of that. Then there are traditions that says that anybody who doesn't believe in what you believe in, and I don't need to name that tradition, what happens? What category they're put under. And why? Because if you associate with them, then you will be in their same fate and you will not experience heaven. To experience heaven, just follow this one path. This one priest, one path, one rabbi, one whatever, just one, and reject everyone else. Exact opposite is this tradition. Include everything else. Because your heart is not so small. You are infinite. Because you have come from the infinite. Of course, we can also go to the East, to the Chinese traditions and see what was going on there. Not like this. It wasn't like this. There is, of course, we don't know much of what goes on in China because there's a wall. First there was the wall of China, and then now there's a firewall, so we don't know exactly what's going on. But we're told, and from what little cultural exchange happened, that they talked about mandate of heaven. That there's a heaven which we have to replicate here. Again, look at the common thread in all the traditions. There's always some kind of negation of life. They're always trying to take you somewhere else to alleviate your suffering. Because human beings suffer and they need hope. They want to get out of this life. And this is the only tradition that goes face to face with life with such courage and says, this is also divine. So in the Chinese traditions, there are many systems of thought, but mandate of heaven has to be replicated. The king is the same as God, and so on and so forth. Then you have Taoism, which is very close, because very pragmatic, doesn't talk about heaven, hell, angels, not even God, nothing, not theistic, very pragmatic, practical, based on reality, but they sneak in the desire for immortality. Right? That, you can, the whole idea is to live gracefully, flow with life, with least resistance, and there are ways to do that according to them. But then comes that sneaky part that if you keep doing that, you can live a long time, you can become immortal. Again, what about death? Why is that not sacred? Why not let go when it's time to die? As Bhattakalata says, even when the body is falling ill, the body is undergoing all the changes, even when it's about to die, you as Shiva shine forth in just the same splendor as you did when you were young and active. So that is also divine. And this is also divine. In all its difficulties, challenges, in all the darkness that life, seeming darkness that we label as darkness, it is still shining with the light of God, with the light of divine. And here comes the clincher, really, because these are the five-fold energies of that divine. And how do we know? From our daily moment-to-moment experience. Chit Shakti, the power of experience. Whose power is that? The fact that you can hear me and the fact that I can speak. You can see and I can see. And even people who are not here can see and hear this. And that's the power of technology. Of course, somebody will say that the volume is not high enough, but I'm speaking in the mic, so they can also hear, right? But whose power is that? Not my power or your power. That's the power beyond our control. That's the source. Tam Shakti Chakra Vibhava Prabhavam Shankaram Stumaha. Shankaram, Sham Karoti iti Shankaraha. He who does auspiciousness, the source is sacred, the source is auspicious, the source is holy. So this power is coming from that, the power to experience. Ananda Shakti, the power to feel happiness. I want to be happy. It's not my happiness. It's happiness of that source. So then my goal is not my happiness, it's happiness. Right? See the difference? There is no me trying to be happy. So I don't need to go to any heaven. I'm fine here. On this earth. In this moment, right here and now. And guess what? Yoga tradition says close your eyes, go into samadhi. And Shaivite tradition says you don't even need to do that. You don't need any mystical experience. You don't need to do anything. You just need to understand life. And therefore, talks are most efficient for Kashmir Shaivism. Right? Because for yoga, you can't just give a talk and then you have to practice. The closest sibling is Advaita Vedanta. So pretty close, so we'll let that one go right now. Benefit of doubt. Right, but Ananda Shakti. Then there is Ichha Shakti, desire. Whose desire is that? That is springing in you. If I say my desire, that agitates me. Because then I go to fulfill it. But if it's just a desire that has arisen, then I will try my best to fulfill it. But if it doesn't happen, it's okay. It is because it was not, and it is not my desire. It is a desire. Gnana Shakti. Knowledge, whatever I know, is I am not the knower of that. The knower is somebody, or I can't even say somebody, right? Is something else. It's not even a thing, but it is. Because beyond these 5 Shaktis is the real nature of Shiva, which is Sat, existence. So it is existence. And existence has these energies. Gnana Shakti, the power of knowing. So, there's so many stories of people forgetting everything at the end of their lives. And there's a story of a Ramakrishna Mission Swami who was a learned scholar and had spent years studying the scriptures. And at the end of his life, things happened to the body and the mind. He forgot. Alzheimer's or whatever, he forgot. And so somebody said, you spent your whole life studying the Shastras, the scriptures, and you've forgotten. How do you feel about that? He says, well, they did their job. It's done. The purpose of studying the scripture was to know myself, and I know who I am. I don't need the scriptures anymore. So that's Gnana Shakti. The power to know is not your power. It can go away any time. That is the power of Shiva. So always be grateful for whatever you experience, whatever happiness you have, whatever desires arise, whatever you know. And finally, Kriya Shakti. Whatever you do, action, is not you doing it. It is because of the touch of that Shiva that you're able to do anything, that all of us are able to even breathe. We don't keep a track of our breath. Of course, now people have that Apple Watch, and they can keep a track of their heart rate, pulse, whatever. But even without that, something keeps a track of it all the time. This is artificial intelligence. Think about natural intelligence that we are a product of. That is, as it said, Kayam Yasmacha Nirgatam. the karyam that has come out of that karana, of that cause, is not different from the cause. And how do they say that? Yatya sthitam idam sarvam. Because this effect is already situated in the cause. For example, I was just looking at this stand of the drum. It's a drum stand, right? Or is it wood? Exactly. People are confused what it is. It's both, and it's, from one angle, it's just wood. The drum stand was already situated in the wood, but we call it a drum stand because we've given it a shape, and now we've given it a name, and it serves a function, right? In the same way, whatever we see, including the body-mind, has just taken on a shape, has taken on a form, and we give it a name, and it serves a function. But in reality, it was already in, and it always remains in that source. Just like a marble statue. You carve a marble statue out of a block of marble. The statue was already in it, but has been given a shape, and now you can see the statue. In the same way, the scripture is saying, this life, with all its difficulties and challenges, is still the light of God shining forth. If we don't view it through our limited lens, people say we worship light. We worship darkness also. Krishna is dark. Kali is dark. So it's not that we just worship light. We worship birth, yes, but we also worship death. There are rituals for birth, there are rituals for death. We worship everything. We worship stones, we worship rivers, we worship mountains, we worship sky, and most importantly, we worship each other. And even more important than that, we worship ourselves. Who I am, as I am, without changing myself in any way. I am perfect the way I am, and so are you. That's the end of all problems. All intellectual problems. Right? Because there is nothing you can do about how a person is made. The genes of that person are beyond your control. You cannot change that. That is not up to us to change, because the divine, as it said, is infinite. So life is diverse. Look at life. No two people are alike, not even twins. Right? Forget siblings, but not even twins are alike. You can tell who is who. No two leaves are alike. No 2 days are alike. No two mental states are alike. Everything is different. You go for identity card, they'll take a thumbprint, now on the iPhone there's Face ID, right? And no two thumbprints are alike. Face ID, iPhone sometimes forgets, if the person grows a beard or has long hair. It's locked. Doesn't remember, because you're changing all the time. Change is happening all the time. No two moments are alike. So this diversity is because of the diversity of that. It is potential in that, it becomes manifest in creation. And it is not up to us to determine, to judge. We don't need a final day of judgment. We don't need any judgment. There's no judgment required, because it is perfect. The way it's beautiful. Everyone's different, everybody's unique, everybody's special, and that's how it is. Now, do you not do anything about, somebody will say, what about activism, and what about social issues and environmental issues and this and that? Yes, you do. Take responsibility and do everything you can, knowing that it is Shiva doing it through you. It is his Kriya Shakti. If you take ownership, that is where the play ends in a tragedy. The moment you take ownership, then you're doomed to not just fail, but fail miserably. At all levels, at the external level and at the mental level. That satisfaction will never arise. And we are acting out of what? Anger? Acting out of, if this knowledge seeps in, we act out of compassion, not out of anger. We act out of loving kindness, not out of judgment, but from a pure space of just sharing, like a flower. The flower doesn't think who to give fragrance to. Its nature is to give fragrance. In the same way, the nature of Shiva is to bestow auspiciousness. And that's what he is doing every moment through all of us. And we will experience it more, even more, if we simply correct our understanding about life. So that is the unique offering of Spanda Karika. That if we just give this teaching a try, and we don't have to try it for 24 hours, we can just try it, and then we get addicted to it, and then we try it more, we go deeper and deeper, till it becomes 24/7. And then it is, as Baba Muktananda used to say, Shiva's garden. This world is Shiva's garden. We don't need any other garden, any other heaven. This is it. There's nothing more to life, to reality than this. It can't get any better. So once again, thank you for taking the time out to come here. And I hope that, given the subject of the year, that all of you take some time out every day to study Spanda Karika or any scripture that helps us live with more compassion and loving kindness. Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai.